What's up, fellow polymaths? In this video of the Java Fundamentals tutorial, we'll be going over the Java Glossary. Some important things that I'd like to know. This contains most but not all the important terms in Java, and this glossary is based from the official Oracle page. Also, it's important to note that you don't need to know all the terms in this glossary, although it's definitely good to know most of the terms. And you're probably familiar with most of the terms anyways, based on the previous videos that we've had from the Java Fundamentals tutorial. So with that out of the way, on to the show. Abstract is a Java keyword that's used in a class definition to specify that a class is not to be instantiated, but rather inherited by other classes. An abstract class can have abstract methods that are not implemented in the abstract class, but in subclasses. Abstract class is a class that contains one or more abstract methods, and therefore can never be instantiated. Abstract classes are defined so that other classes can extend them and make them concrete by implementing the abstract methods. An abstract method is a method that has no implementation. Abstract Window Toolkit, also called AWT, is a collection of graphical user interface components that were implemented using native platform versions of the components. These components provide that subset of functionality which is common to all native platforms, largely supplanted by the project swing component. Note that it was also supplanted by JavaFX. Access control is the methods by which interactions with the resources are limited to collections of users or programs for the purpose of enforcing integrity, confidentiality, or availability of constraints. ACID is the acronym for the four properties guaranteed by the transactions, which are atomicity, consistency, isolation, and durability. Actual parameter test is the list of arguments specified for a particular method call. API is an application programming interface. That specification of how a programmer writing an application accesses the behavior and state of classes and objects. Applet is a component that typically executes in a web browser, but can execute in a variety of other applications or devices that support the applet programming model. Side note, this is rarely used these days. Other solutions have taken over the applet. Argument is a data item specified in a method call. An argument can be a literal value, a variable, or an expression. An array is a collection of data items, all of the same type, in which each item's position is uniquely designated by an integer. Assert is used for debugging, and you don't find assert being used all that often, by the way. ASCII is a standard assignment of 7-bit numeric codes to characters. Atomic refers to an operation that is never interrupted or left in an incomplete state under any circumstance. Authentication is a process by which an entity proves to another entity that it is acting on behalf of a specific identity. Autoboxing is automatic conversion between reference and primitive types. Bean is a reusable software component that conforms to certain design and naming conventions. The conventions enable beans to be easily combined to create an application using tools that understand the conventions. Binary operator is an operator that has two arguments. Bit is the smallest unit of information in a computer with a value of 0 or 1. Bitwise operator is an operator that manipulates the bits of one or more of its operands individually and in parallel. Examples include the binary logical operators, which is the ampersand, pipe symbol, and caret, and then the binary shift operators, which is the 2 less thans, the 2 graters, and the 3 greater than signs, and the unary ones complement operator, which is the tilde. A block in the Java programming language is any code between the matching braces. A Boolean refers to an expression or variable that can only have a true or false value. The Java programming language provides the Boolean type and the literal values true and false. Break is a Java keyword that's used to resume program execution at the statement immediately following the current statement. If followed by a label, the program resumes execution at the labeled statement. A byte is a sequence of 8 bits. Java provides a corresponding byte type. Bytecode is machine-independent code generated by the Java compiler and executed by the Java interpreter. A case is a Java keyword that defines a group of statements to begin executing if a value specified matches the value defined by preceding switch keyword. Casting is explicit conversion from one data type to another. Catch is a Java keyword used to declare a block of statements to be executed in the event that a Java exception or runtime error occurs. It occurs in a preceding try block. Char is a Java keyword used to declare a variable of a type character. For class in the Java programming language is a type that defines the implementation of a particular kind of object. A class definition defines instance and class variables and methods, as well as specifying the interfaces the class implements and the immediate superclass of that class. If the superclass is not explicitly specified, the superclass will implicitly be an object. And a side note, the object is pretty much the superclass of every single class in Java. Everything is inherited by the object class. A class method is a method that is invoked without reference to a particular object. Class methods affect the class as a whole, not a particular instance of the class, also called a static method. Class variable is a data item associated with the particular class as a whole, not with particular instances of the class. Class variables are defined in class definitions, also called a static field. A class path is an environmental variable which tells a Java virtual machine and the Java technology-based applications where to find the class libraries, including the user-defined class libraries. The client, in the client-server model of communications, the client is a process that remotely accesses the resources of a compute server, such as compute power and large memory capacity. The code base works together with the code attribute and the applet tag to give a complete specification of where to find the main applet class file. Code specifies the name of the file, and the code base specifies the URL of the directory containing the file. As a side note, as mentioned before, applets are rarely used these days, so this term you don't really need to be familiar with. And also, code base is another term for pretty much the entire code. For comments in a program, explanatory text is ignored by the compiler. In programs written in Java programming language, comments are delimited using a double slash or slash with an asterisk on both sides. The commit is the point in the transaction when all updates to any resources involved in the transaction are made permanent. A compilation unit is the smallest unit of source code that can be compiled. In the current implementation of the Java platform, the compilation unit is a file. A compiler is a program to translate source code into code to be executed by the computer. The Java compiler translates source code written in the Java programming language into bytecode for the Java virtual machine. Compositing is a process of superimposing one image on another to create a single image. Constructor is a pseudo method that creates an object. In the Java programming language, constructors are instance methods with the same name as their class. Constructors are invoked using the new keyword. Const is a revert Java method not used by current versions of the Java programming language. So a side note, const is basically what the final keyword is, so you don't see that const keyword being used anymore. Continue is a Java keyword used to resume program execution at the end of the current loop. If followed by a label, continue resumes execution where the label occurs. Conversational state is the field values of a session bean plus the transitive closure of the objects reachable from the bean's fields. The transitive closure of the bean is defined in terms of the serialization protocol of the Java programming language, that is, the fields that would be stored by serializing the bean instance. So, side note, I know the term bean has been mentioned a few times. As you go along more in your Java learning, you'll be able to come across certain tools such as EJB, which stands for Enterprise Java Beans, as well as Spring, which utilizes beans. Corba, which stands for Common Object Request Broker Architecture, is a language-independent distributed object model specified by the Object Management Group. Personally, this Corba term I haven't come across before, so I'm guessing it's not a very common one. Core class is a public class or interface that is a standard member of the Java platform. The intent is that the core classes of the Java platform at minimum are available on all operating systems where the Java platform runs. A program written entirely in the Java programming language relies only on core classes, meaning it can run anywhere. Core packages are the required set of APIs in the Java platform edition, which must be supported in any and all the compatible implementations. Credentials are the information describing the security attributes of a principal. Credentials can be acquired only through authentication or delegation. Critical section is a segment of code in which a thread uses resources, such as certain instance variables, that can be used by other threads, but that must not be used by them at the same time. Declaration is a statement that establishes an identifier and associates the attributes with it, without necessarily reserving its storage for data or providing the implementation for methods. Default is a Java keyword optionally used after all case conditions in a switch statement. If all case conditions are not matched by the value of the switch statement, the default keyword will be executed. Definition is a declaration that reserves storage for data or provides implementation for methods. Delegation is an act whereby one principal authorizes another principal to use its identity or privileges with some restrictions. Deprecation refers to a class, interface, constructor, method, or field that is no longer recommended and may cease to exist in a future version. derived from. Class X is derived from class Y if class X extends class Y. Side note, so basically this is an example of inheritance. Distributed is running in more than one address space. Distributed application is an application made up of distinct components running in separate runtime environments, usually on different platforms connected through a network. Typical distributed applications are Tier 2, which are client-server, and 3-tier, which is client, middleware, and server, and N-tier, which represents client, multiple middleware setups, and multiple servers. Do is a Java keyword used to declare a loop that will iterate a block of statements. The loop's exit condition can be specified with the while keyword. The DOM, which stands for Document Object Model, is a tree of objects with interfaces for traversing the tree and writing an XML version of it as defined by the W3C specification. Side note, you'll be familiar with the Document Object Model when you move on to different languages such as HTML as well as JavaScript. Double is a Java keyword used to define a variable of type double. Double precision in the Java programming language describes the floating point number that holds 64 bits of data. DTD is a document type definition, is a description of the structure and properties of a class of XML files. Also, side note, you'll also see these when you learn about HTML as well. Else is a Java keyword used to execute a block of statements in the case that the test condition with the if keyword evaluates to false. Embedded Java technology is availability of Java 2 platform micro-edition technology under restrictive license agreement that allows a licensee to leverage certain Java technologies to create and deploy a closed box application that exposes no APIs. Encapsulation is localization of knowledge within a module. Because objects encapsulate data and implementation, the user of an object can view the object as a black box that provides services. Instance variables and methods can be added, deleted, or changed, but as long as the services provided by the object remains the same, the code that uses the object can continue to use it without being rewritten. An enum is a Java keyword used to declare an enumerated type. Enumerated type is a type whose legal values consist of a fixed set of constants. Exception is an event during a program execution that prevents the program from continuing normally, generally an error. The Java programming language supports exceptions with the try, catch, and throw keywords. Exception handler is a block of code that reacts to a specific type of exception. If the exception is for an error that the program can recover from, the program can resume executing after exception handler has executed. Executable content is an application that runs from within an HTML file. Side note, as mentioned before, you don't see applets anymore, so this one you're not really going to come across these days. Extends is when, for example, a class X extends class Y to add functionality either by adding the fields or methods to class Y or by overriding the methods of class Y. An interface extends another interface by adding methods. Class X is said to be a subclass of class Y. Field is a data member of a class. Unless specified otherwise, a field is not static. Final is a Java keyword. You define an entity once and cannot change it or derive from it later. More specifically, a final class cannot be subclassed. Final method cannot be overridden, and a final variable cannot change from its initialized value. Finally is a Java keyword that executes a block of statements regardless of whether a Java exception or runtime error occurred in a block defined previously by the try keyword. Float is a Java keyword used to define a floating point number variable. For is a Java keyword used to declare a loop that reiterates statements. The programmer can specify the statements to be executed, exit conditions, and initialization variables for the loop. FTP is a file transfer protocol. FTP, which is based on the TCP/IP protocol, enables the fetching and sorting of files between hosts on the internet. Formal parameter list are the parameters specified in the definition of a particular method. Garbage collection is the automatic detection and freeing of memory that is no longer in use. The Java runtime system performs garbage collection so that programmers never explicitly free objects. Generic is a class, interface, or method that declares one or more type variables. These type variables are known as type parameters. A generic declaration defines a set of parameterized types, one for each possible invocation of the type parameter section. At runtime, all of these parameterized types share the same class, interface, or method. Go-to is a reserved Java keyword. However, it's not used by current versions of the Java programming language. Group is a collection of principles within a given security policy domain. GUI, also known as graphical user interface, refers to the techniques involved in using graphics, along with a keyboard and a mouse, to provide an easy-to-use interface to some program. Hexadecimal is a numbering system that uses 16 as its base. The marks 0 to 9 and A to F represent the digits 0 to 15. In programs written in the Java programming language, hexadecimal numbers must be preceded with a 0x. Hierarchy is a classification of relationships in which each item except the top one, which is known as the root, is a specialized form of the item above it. Each item can have one or more items below it in the hierarchy. In the Java class hierarchy, the root is the object class. Side note, so remember we were talking about the object class before, how it's pretty much the parent of any single class that you create. So the object class is pretty much the beginning of every Java class, and every class inherits from that object class. HTML also stands for Hypertext Markup Language. This is a file format based on the HTML language for hypertext documents on the internet. It is very simple and allows for embedding of images, sounds, video streams, form fields, simple text formatting, and so on. References to other objects are embedded using URLs. HTTP is the Hypertext Transfer Protocol. This is the Internet Protocol based on the TCP/IP used to fetch hypertext objects from remote hosts. And side note, HTTP is pretty much the way of communication for the internet on how we're able to connect to websites, as well as other things such as APIs. HTTPS is HTTP layered over the SSL protocol. So you can think of this as a more secure version of HTTP. IDL is the Interface Definition Language. API is written in the Java programming language that provides standards-based interoperability and connectivity with Corba. Identifier is the name of an item in a program written in the Java programming language. IIOP is the Internet Inter-ORB protocol. It's a protocol used for communication between Corba object request brokers. If is a Java keyword used to conduct a conditional test and execute a block of statements if the test evaluates it true. Impersonation is an act whereby one entity assumes the identity and privileges of another entity without restrictions and without any indication visible to the recipients of the impersonator's calls that delegation has taken place. Impersonation is a case of simple delegation. Implement is a Java keyword included in the class declaration to specify any interfaces that are implemented by the current class. Import is a Java keyword used at the beginning of a source file that can specify classes or entire packages to be referred to later without including the package names in the reference. Inheritance is a concept of classes automatically containing the variables and methods defined in their supertypes. Instance is an object of a particular class. In programs written in the Java programming language, an instance of a class is created by using the new operator followed by the class name. Instance method is any method that is invoked with respect to an instance of a class, also simply called a method. Instance variable is an item of data that is associated with a particular object. Each instance of a class has its own copy of the instance variables defined in the class, also called a field. Instance of is a 2-argument Java keyword that tests whether the runtime type of the first argument is assignment compatible with the second argument. Int is a Java keyword to define a variable of type integer. Interface is a Java keyword used to define a collection of method definitions and constant values. It can later be implemented by classes that define this interface with the implements keyword. Internet is an enormous network consisting of literally millions of hosts for many organizations and countries around the world. It is physically put together from many smaller networks of data traveling by a common set of protocols. Also, side note, I'm sure you probably realize by now that a lot of these terms are not specifically Java terms, but computer terms as a whole, or networking terms. IP is Internet Protocol, the basic protocol of the Internet. It enables an unreliable delivery of individual packets from one host to another. It makes no guarantees about whether or not the packet will be delivered, how long it will take, or if multiple packets will arrive in the order they were sent. Protocols built on top of this add to the notions of connection and reliability. Interpreter is a module that alternatively decodes and executes every statement in some body of code. The Java interpreter decodes and executes bytecode for the Java virtual machine. JAR, which stands for Java Archive, is a platform-independent file format that aggregates many files into one. Multiple applets written in the Java programming language and their requisite components, such as class files, images, sounds, and other resources files, can be bundled in a JAR file and subsequently downloaded to a browser in a single HTTP transaction. It also supports files compression and digital signatures. Java is Sun's trademark for a set of technologies for creating and safely running software programs in both standalone and networked environments. Side note, Sun is the previous owners of Java before they were bought out by Oracle. Their official name was Sun Microsystems. Java 2 platform is the second generation of the Java platform. The first generation was the JDK. Java 2 SDK Standard Edition is a software development kit development environment for building applications, applets, and components using the Java programming language. This SDK provides a reference implementation of the J2 SE platform. Java APIs for integrated networks, also called Jane, enables rapid development of next-generation telecom products and services on the Java platform. Java Card API is a compliant application environment focused on smart cards. Side note, the more I read this glossary, the more I get the sense that this was created probably 2 decades ago. Java Compatibility Kit, also called JCK, is a test suite, set of tools and other requirements used to certify Java platform implementation conformant both to the applicable Java platform specifications and the Java software reference implementations. Java Database Connectivity, also called JDBC, is an industry standard for database independent connectivity between the Java platform and a wide range of databases. The JDBC provides a call-level API for SQL-based database access. Java Development Kit, also called JDK, is a software component environment for writing applets and applications in the Java programming language. Java Foundation Classes, also called JFC, is an extension that adds the graphical user interface class libraries to the abstract window toolkit. Java Interface Definition Language is a set of Java APIs that provide Corba, the interoperability and connectivity capabilities on the J2EE platform. These capabilities enable J2EE applications to invoke operations on remote networking services using the OMG, IDL, and IIOP. Side note, this is a term that you don't really come across all that often. Java Media APIs are a set of APIs that support the integration of audio and video clips, 2D fonts, graphics, as well as 3D models and telephony. Java Media Framework is a core framework that supports clocks for synchronizing between different media, such as audio and video output. The Standard Edition framework allows users to do full audio and video streaming. Java Naming and Directory Interface, or also called JNDI or JND, is a set of APIs that assists with the interfacing to multiple names and directory services. Java Native Interface is a standard programming interface for writing Java native methods and embedding into the JVM into native applications. Primary goal is binary compatibility of native methods libraries across all JVM implementations on a given platform. Java Platform consists of class libraries, a JVM and class loader, which comprise the runtime environment, and the compiler, debugger, and other tools, which comprise the development kit. Java Platform Editions is a definitive and agreed-upon version of the Java platform that provides the functionality needed over a broad market segment. In addition, it's compromised to 2 kinds of API sets: the core packages, which are essential to all implementations of a given platform edition, and the optional packages, which are available for a given platform edition, which may be supported in a compatible implementation. The 3 distinct editions include the Java 2 Enterprise Edition, the Micro Edition, and the Standard Edition. Java Remote Method Invocation is a distributed object model for Java program to Java program in which the methods of remote objects written in Java programming language can be invoked from other Java virtual machines, possibly on different hosts. Java Runtime Environment, also called JRE, is a subset of the JDK for end users and developers who want to redistribute the runtime environment alone. The Java runtime environment consists of the Java virtual machine, the core classes, and the supporting files. The Java virtual machine is a software execution engine that safely and compatibly executes the bytecodes and Java class files on a microprocessor, whether in a computer or another electronic device. Java Beans is a portable platform independent reusable component model. A component that conforms to this model is called a bean. Java Check is a tool for checking compliance of applications and applets written to a specification. Java Safe is a tool for tracking and managing source file changes written in Java. JavaScript is a web scripting language that is used in both browsers and web servers. Like all scripting languages, it is used primarily to tie other components together or to accept user input. Side note, JavaScript is pretty much ubiquitous these days on the internet, and pretty much every website you go to runs some sort of JavaScript. JDK is a software development environment for writing applets and applications in Java, which we've already went over, by the way. Jitney Technology is a set of Java APIs that may be incorporated an optional package in any Java 2 platform edition. Just-in-time compiler, also called JIT, is a compiler that converts all the bytecode into native machine code just as a Java program is run. This results in runtime speed improvements over code that is interpreted by a Java virtual machine. Keyword is how Java sets aside words. These words are reserved by the language itself and therefore are not available as names for variables or methods. Lexical pertains to how the characters in source code are translated into tokens that the compiler can understand. Linker is a module that builds an executable, complete program for component machine code modules. The Java linker creates a runnable program for compiled classes. Literal is the basic representation of any integer, floating point, or character value. For example, 3.0 is a double precision floating point literal, and A, in quotes, is a character literal. Local variable is a data item known within a block, but inaccessible to code outside the block. For example, any variable defined within a method is a local variable and can't be used outside the method. Long is a Java keyword used to define a variable of type long. Member is a field or method of a class. Unless specified otherwise, a member is not static. Method is a function defined in a class. Unless specified otherwise, a method is not static. Module declares a module, which is a feature new in Java 9. Multi-threaded describes a program that is designed to have parts of its code executed concurrently. Native is a Java keyword that is used in method declarations to specify that the method is not implemented in the same Java source file, but rather another language. New is a Java keyword used to create an instance of a class. Null is a type that has one value, the null reference, represented by the literal null, which is formed from ASCII characters. A null literal is always of the null type. Objects are the principal building blocks for object-oriented programs. Each object is a programming unit consisting of data, such as instance variables, and functionality, such as instance methods. Object-oriented design is a software design method that models the characteristics of abstract or real objects using classes and objects. Octal is a numbering system using 8 as its base, using the numerals 0 to 7 as its digits. In programs written in the Java programming language, octal numbers must be preceded with 0. Optional packages are the set or sets of APIs in the Java Program Platform Edition, which are available with and may be supported in a compatible implementation. ORB, also called Object Request Broker, is a library that enables Corba objects to locate and communicate with one another. OS Principal is a principal native to the operating system on which the Java platform is executed. OTS, also called Object Transaction Service, is a definition that interfaces that permit Corba objects to participate in transactions. On a side note, if you might be stressing out over these Corba terms, don't be concerned about them. Overloading is using one identifier to refer to multiple items in the same scope. In the Java programming language, you can overload methods, but not variables or operators. Overriding is providing a different implementation of a method in a subclass of the class that originally defined the method. Package is a group of types. Packages are declared with the package keyword. Here, in networking, is a functional unit in the same layer as another entity. Persistence is a protocol for transferring the state of a bean between its instance variables and an underlying database. Side note, as you get more familiar with Java libraries such as Spring, for example, will be a term that comes up quite frequently. Pixel is the picture element on the display area, such as a monitor screen or a printed page. Each pixel is individually accessible. POA, also called Portable Object Adapter, is a Corba standard for building server-side applications that are portable across heterogeneous ORBs. Primary key is an object that uniquely identifies an entity being within a home. Primitive type is a variable data type in which the variable's value is of the appropriate size and format for its type, a number, a character, or a Boolean value. Principal is identity assigned to an entity as a result of authentication. Private is a Java keyword used in a method or variable declaration. It signifies that the method or variable can only be accessed by other elements of its class. Privilege is a security attribute that does not have property or uniqueness and which may be shared by many principals. An example of a privilege is a group. Process is a virtual address space containing one or more threads. Property are the characteristics of an object that users can set, such as the color of a window. Profiles is a collection of Java APIs that complements one or more Java 2 platform editions by adding domain-specific capabilities. And side note, these seem to be based on older Java technologies. Protected is a Java keyword used in a method or variable declaration. It signifies that the method or variable can only be accessed by elements residing in its class, subclasses, or classes within the same package. Public is a Java keyword used in a method or variable declaration. It signifies that the method or variable can be accessed by elements residing in other classes. Raster is a two-dimensional rectangular grid of pixels. Realm is also a string passed as part of the HTTP request during the basic authentication that defines a protection space. The protected resources on a server can be partitioned into a set of protection spaces, each within its own authentication scheme and/or authorization database. Reference is a variable data type in which the variable's value is an address. Requires, it specifies the required libraries inside a module, which is new to Java 9. Return is a Java keyword used to finish the execution of a method. It can be followed by a value required by the method definition. Rollback is a point in the transaction when all updates to any databases involved in the transaction are reversed. Root, in the hierarchy of items, is the one item from which all other items are descended. The root item has nothing above it in the hierarchy. Side note, so as we mentioned before, the object class is the root of all classes. RPC also stands for Remote Procedure Call, executing what looks like a normal procedure call or method invocation by sending network packets to some remote host. Runtime system is a software environment in which programs compiled for the Java virtual machine can run. The runtime system includes all the code necessary to load programs written into the Java programming language, dynamically link native methods, manage memory, handle exceptions, and an implementation of the JVM, which may be a Java interpreter. SACS, or also called Simple API for XML, is an event-driven serial access mechanism for accessing XML documents. Sandbox comprises of a number of cooperating systems, ranging from security managers that execute as part of the application to security measures signed into the JVM and the language itself. The sandbox protects sensitive system information from access by untrusted and potentially malicious applications. Scope is a characteristic of an identifier that determines where the identifier can be used. Most identifiers in the Java programming environment have either class or local scope. Instance and class scopes and methods have class scope. They can be used outside the class and its subclasses by only prefixing them with an instance of the class or class variables and methods with the class name. All other variables are declared within methods and have local scope. They can be used only within the enclosed block. Secure Socket Layer, also called SSL, is a protocol that allows communication between a web browser and a server to be encrypted for privacy. Security attributes is a set of properties associated with the principal. Security attributes can be associated with the principal by an authentication protocol. Security context is an object that encapsulates the shared state of information regarding security between two entities. Security policy domain is a scope over which security policies are defined and enforced by a security administrator. The security policy domain has the following characteristics. It has a collection of users, it's a well-defined authentication protocol for authenticating users, and may have groups to simplify setting security policies. Security technology domain is a scope over which the same security mechanism is used to enforce a security policy. Multiple security policy domains can exist within a single technology domain. Serialization is the encoding of objects and the objects reachable from them into a stream of bytes and the complementary reconstruction of the object graph from the stream. So, side note, basically you can think of serialization as converting one type of data to something else. Short is a Java keyword used to define a variable of type short. Single precision in the Java programming language describes a floating point number with 32 bits of data. SGML is a standardized, generalized markup language. It is an ISO, ANSI, or an ECMA standard that specifies a way to annotate text documents with information about the types of sections of a document. SOAP, which stands for Simple Object Access Protocol, uses a combination of XML-based data structuring and the HTTP to define a standardized method for invoking methods and objects distributed in diverse operating environments across the internet. SQL, which stands for Structured Query Language, is a standardized relational database language for defining database objects and manipulating data. Static is a Java keyword used to define a variable as a class variable. Classes maintain one copy of class variables regardless of how many instances exist of that class. Static can be used to define a method as a class method. Class methods are invoked by the class instead of a specific instance and can only operate on class variables. Static field is another name for class variable. Static method is another name for class method. Stream is simply a byte stream of data that is sent from a sender to a receiver. There are two basic categories. The Java.io package includes two abstract classes, which are the input stream and the output stream. Subarray is an array that is inside another array. Subclass is a class that is derived from a particular class, perhaps with one or more classes in between. Side note, subclass can also be considered as child class. Subtype. If the type X extends or implements type Y, then type X is a subtype of type Y. Side note, this is also an example of inheritance. Superclass is a class from which a particular class is derived, perhaps with one or more classes in between. Super is a Java keyword used to access members of a class inherited by the class in which it appears. Supertype is in which all the interfaces and classes that are extended are implemented by that type. Switch is a Java keyword used to evaluate a variable that can later be matched with a value specified by the case keyword in order to execute a group of statements. Swing is a collection of graphical user interface components that runs uniformly on any native platform which supports a Java virtual machine. Because they are written entirely in the Java programming language, these components may provide functionality above and beyond that provided by native platform equivalents. Contrast with the AWT. Synchronize is a keyword in the Java programming language that, when applied to a method, code, or block, guarantees that at most one thread at a time executes that code. TCP/IP is a transmission control protocol based on IP. This is an internet protocol that provides for the reliable delivery of streams of data from one host to another. Technology Compatibility Kit, also called TCK, is a test suite, a set of tools and other requirements used to certify an implementation of a particular Sun technology conformant both to the applicable specifications of Sun or Sun design reference implementations. Side note, this is very old, and given that it references Sun, it's more than likely to be dated. Thin Client is a system that runs a very light operating system with no local system administration and executes applications delivered over the network. This is a Java keyword that can be used to represent an instance of the class in which it appears. This can also be used to access class variables and methods. Thread is a basic unit of a program execution. The process can have several threads running concurrently, each performing a different job, such as waiting for events or performing a time-consuming job that the program doesn't need to complete before going on. When a thread has finished its job, the thread is suspended or destroyed. Throw is a Java keyword that allows the user to throw an exception or any class that implements the throwable interface. Throws is a Java keyword in the method declarations that specify which exceptions are not handled within the method, but rather pass to the next higher level of the program. Transaction is an atomic unit of work that modifies data. A transaction encloses one or more program statements, all of which either complete or roll back. Transactions enable multiple users to access the same data concurrently. Transaction isolation level is a degree in which the intermediate state of a data being modified by a transaction is visible to other concurrent transactions, and data being modified by other transactions is visible to it. Transaction Manager provides the services and management functions required to support transaction demarcation, transactional resource management, synchronization, and transactional context propagation. Transient is a keyword in the Java programming language that indicates that a field is not part of the serialized form of an object. When an object is serialized, the values of its transient fields are not included in the serial representation, while the values of its non-transient fields are included. Try is a Java keyword that defines a block of statements that may throw a Java language exception. If an exception is thrown, an optional catch block can handle specific exceptions thrown within the try block. Also, an optional finding block will be executed regardless of whether an exception is thrown or not. Type is a class or interface. Unicode is 16-bit characters set defined by the ISO. All source code in the Java programming language environment is written in Unicode. URI is a uniform resource identifier. It's a compact string of characters for identifying an abstract or physical resource. A URI is either a URL or a URN. URLs and URNs are concrete entities that actually exist. A URI is an abstract superclass. URL is a uniform resource locator, is a standard for writing a text reference to an arbitrary piece of data in the World Wide Web. A URL is where the protocol specifies a protocol to use to fetch the object, such as an HTTP protocol or an FTP protocol. URN is a uniform resource name, a unique identifier that identifies an entity but doesn't tell where it is located. The system can use an URN to look up an entity locally before trying to find it on the web. It also allows the web location to change while still allowing the entity to be found. var declares a variable, and this is a new feature in Java 10. Side note, var is also a variable declaration in JavaScript. Variable is an item of data named by an identifier. Each variable has a type, such as int, object, and a scope. Virtual machine is an abstract specification for a computing device that can be implemented in different ways in software or hardware. You compile to the instruction set of a virtual machine much you'd like to compile the instruction set of a microprocessor. The JVM consists of a bytecode instruction set, a set of registers, a stack, a garbage collected heap, and an area for storing methods. Void is a Java keyword used in method declarations to specify that the method does not return any value. Void can also be used as a non-functional statement. Volatile is a Java keyword used in variable declarations that specifies that the variable is modified asynchronously by concurrently running threads. Web server is software that provides services to access the internet, an intranet or an extranet. A web server hosts websites, provides the support for HTTP and other protocols, and executes server-side programs, such as CGI scripts or servlets that perform certain functions. While is a Java keyword used to declare a loop that iterates a block of statements. The loop's exit condition is specified as part of the while statement. World readable files are files on a file system that can be viewed by any user. Wrapper is an object that encapsulates and delegates to another object to alter its interface or behavior in some way. World Wide Web is the web of systems and the data in them that is the internet. XML stands for Extensible Markup Language, a markup language that allows you to define the tags, which are also called markups, needed to identify the data and text in XML documents. So there are some terms that weren't mentioned in the glossary. For example, EJB, which is Enterprise Java Beans, are used to create enterprise applications using beans. Hibernate is a tool similar to JDBC that's used to match row, table, and column data with Java classes and variables using object relational mapping. JavaFX is a tool used for implementing GUI programs. This is a more updated version of Java Swing. Pojo, which stands for Plain Old Java Object, contains a basic class with variables and get and set methods. Spring Framework is a very popular framework used to create enterprise applications, and these applications are used by many large businesses and enterprises. Unit testing tests a piece of code in a program. Tools that involve unit testing include JUnit and Mockito. If this video was of any value to you, then please leave a comment, like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.